The screen of my laptop was too bright in the dim light of our living room. On it was the confirmation email for my flight to Chicago, business class, leaving Thursday morning, returning Monday night. A real trip for real work. My boss had handed me the project file himself, but the email wasn't what held my attention. It was the cold, hard knot in my stomach that had been tightening for weeks. Chloe, my girlfriend of 2 years, had been different. Not in big ways, but in 100 small ones that felt like paper cuts. Her phone, which used to face up on the couch, now always screen down. The new, frequent girls' nights with friends I'd never met. Her vague smiles when I asked how her day was. The way she'd sometimes look at me, not with annoyance but with a distant kind of pity, like I was a problem she hadn't figured out how to solve. And then there was Mark. Mark from her spin class. Mark who was just a friend she sometimes got coffee with. Mark whose name had started popping up in her conversations a little too often. I didn't want to believe it. I loved her. I loved our life. The shared apartment with the terrible plumbing, the lazy Sunday breakfasts, the way she always stole the last bite of my dessert. But the doubt was a weed, and it was growing in the dark, choking out my peace. So I made a plan. A terrible, desperate plan. My fingers, cold and clumsy, opened a new browser tab. I went back to the airline's website. I logged in with a different account, one she didn't know about. I searched for the same route, home city to Chicago, but instead of Thursday I selected Friday. I bought a one-way ticket in economy, paying with a credit card she never saw. The receipt popped up in my email. I felt a wave of shame so strong it made me nauseous. I was lying. I was setting a trap for the woman I wanted to marry. The guilt was a living thing in my chest as I walked into the bedroom. Chloe was already in bed, reading a novel. She looked up and smiled, and for a second the old warmth was there. "All set for your big trip, Mr. Important," she teased. "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Just need to pack tomorrow." Wednesday night was packing night. It was our ritual. She sat cross-legged on the floor of our walk-in closet, a small mountain of my clothes beside her. She folded each shirt and pair of pants with a careful precision I never had. "Don't forget your good socks," she said, tucking a rolled pair into the corner of my suitcase. "And your presentation USB is in the front pocket." "Thanks," I mumbled, handing her another stack of t-shirts. She looked up at me, her brow furrowed. "You okay? You seem quiet." "Just tired," I lied. "Pre-trip stress," she nodded, accepting it. Then she reached into a shopping bag beside her and pulled out a small, familiar blue packet. "Here," she said, a shy smile on her face, "your favorite oat cookies, for the hotel room, so you don't get tempted by the overpriced minibar." She placed them gently on top of my folded sweaters. That small act of kindness, remembering my silly snack preference, was like a knife twisting in the guilt. This was the woman I was spying on. This was the woman I suspected of betraying me. In that moment, I almost called it all off. I almost dropped to my knees and told her about my stupid, paranoid plan and begged her to forgive me. But I didn't. The fear of being a fool was stronger than the fear of being wrong. She closed the suitcase and zipped it shut. Standing up, she wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her head on my chest. I held her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, coconut, and vanilla. I memorized the feel of her, the weight of her against me. "I'm going to miss you," she said softly, her voice muffled by my shirt. "I'll miss you too," I whispered into her hair, and I meant it with every shattered piece of my heart. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside her, listening to her steady breathing, staring at the ceiling, watching the numbers change on the digital clock. The suitcase stood by the door like an accusation. Thursday morning arrived, gray and drizzly. We went through our normal goodbye routine. She made coffee. I double-checked my travel documents. The taxi honked from the street below. At the door, she kissed me. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but it was soft and lingering. "Text me when you land," she said. "I will. Love you. Love you too." I wheeled my suitcase out, giving her one last wave as the elevator doors closed. She was smiling a little sadly. I rode down to the lobby, my stomach in knots. The taxi driver was a cheerful man who tried to make conversation. I gave one-word answers. As we pulled away from the curb, I twisted in my seat. I saw her, our Chloe, standing at our 7th-floor window watching me go. She lifted a hand. I lifted mine back until the building turned a corner and vanished from sight. "Airport right," the driver confirmed. I took a deep breath. The point of no return. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Change of plan. Take me to the City Inn Motel, the one by the cargo terminals." He gave me a curious look in the rearview mirror but just shrugged. "You're the boss." The City Inn Motel was a sad, flat building the color of old teeth. I checked in under my own name, paid in cash, and was given a key to a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. I put my suitcase down. The one meant for Chicago. I wouldn't need it. I had a small duffel bag with a change of clothes and my toiletries. I sat on the edge of the hard bed. The room was silent except for the hum of the ancient air conditioner. This was it, the waiting. I took out my phone. It was a lifeline and a potential weapon. It was quiet. Hours passed. I watched bad TV. I ordered a terrible burger from room service. I paced the short length of the carpet. My mind was a prison of its own making, cycling through memories of Chloe, her laugh, her anger, her kindness, and the shadow of Mark, a man I'd only seen in a Facebook photo. Then, as the afternoon light began to fade, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. Chloe, landed safe. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was the first active part of the lie. I typed back, David, yes, miss you. I stared at the message thread. She didn't reply. No heart emoji. No miss you more, just silence. Was she busy, or was she with someone? The doubt fed on the silence, growing stronger. Night fell completely. The motel sign flickered orange through the thin curtains. It was time. I stood up, my legs stiff. I picked up my duffel bag, leaving the big suitcase in the corner of the room. I walked out, didn't bother checking out. Outside, the air was cooler. I used my phone to call a rideshare. When the car arrived, a quiet hybrid, I gave the address, my own address. The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. The journey back across the city felt surreal. I was going home. But I was a ghost returning, an intruder in my own life. We passed familiar landmarks, the giant cinema, the park where we walked our friend's dog, the taco place we loved. Each one felt like a punch. Finally, the car turned onto our street. My heart was no longer beating fast. It was a solid, heavy drum in my ears, a painful, rhythmic thud of dread. You can let me out here, I said, my voice rough. At the corner, I paid and got out. I stood on the sidewalk, 2 blocks from my own apartment building, and looked down the street. Our windows were lit. She was home. I started walking, each step feeling heavier than the last, carrying me toward whatever truth was waiting. The 2-block walk to my apartment building felt like crossing a desert. Every step was slow and heavy, as if my shoes were filled with sand. The cool night air did nothing to clear the fog in my head. My duffel bag, slung over my shoulder, felt like it held bricks instead of just a change of clothes. I kept my head down, watching the cracks in the pavement pass under my feet. I didn't want to see anyone I knew. I didn't want to have to explain why I was here on this street when I was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. The lobby of our building was usually quiet at this time, and tonight was no different. The polished marble floor reflected the harsh fluorescent lights above. The doorman's desk was empty. Frank must have been on his rounds. I was grateful. I didn't think I could muster a convincing lie for him right now. I moved quickly to the elevator bank and pressed the call button. The silence in the lobby was so deep I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the corner. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. The door slid open, revealing the mirrored interior. I avoided looking at my own reflection as I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 7th floor. The music started, some bland, instrumental version of a pop song I vaguely recognized. It was too cheerful. It felt like a mockery. As the elevator began its slow climb, I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the wall. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, in and out, but my breaths were shallow, catching in my chest. The knot from my stomach had climbed into my throat. "What are you doing, David?" A voice in my head asked. "You can still turn back. Go to a hotel. Get on your real flight tomorrow. You don't have to know, but I did have to know." The not knowing had become a torture worse than any truth could possibly be. The elevator chimed again. 7th floor. The hallway was long and quiet, lit by soft sconces on the walls. Our door was at the far end, number 712. My feet made no sound on the thick carpet runner. I could hear the faint thump of bass from someone's TV a few doors down. As I got closer to our apartment, I heard something else. Music. It was muffled by the door, but I knew it instantly. It was our road trip playlist. The one we'd made together last summer for the drive to the coast. A mix of old rock songs, indie folk, and a few embarrassingly catchy pop tunes we'd sing at the top of our lungs. Hearing it now, seeping from under the door of our dark, silent hallway, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. She was playing our playlist. I stopped in front of the dark wood door. My key was in my hand, cold and familiar. I just stood there listening. The song changed. It was one she loved, one I'd pretend to hate just to tease her. I could almost hear her singing along in the kitchen while she cooked. I put my ear closer to the door. Beyond the music there were other sounds, the faint clink of glass, a soft thud, and then it came laughter, Chloe's laugh, bright, genuine, uninhibited, the laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in weeks. It was followed immediately by another sound, a deeper, rumbling chuckle, a man's laugh. The sound was a physical blow. It sucked the air right out of my lungs. For a second I saw stars at the edges of my vision. The hallway seemed to tilt. I braced a hand against the door frame. This was it. This was the moment. The proof was on the other side of this door, laughing along with my music. All the guilt, all the second guessing, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, clear clarity. I had to see, I had to know for sure. My hand was steady as I slid the key into the lock. I turned it slowly, millimeter by millimeter, trying to be utterly silent. The lock disengaged with the quietest of clicks. I turned the handle and pushed the door open just an inch, then another. The smell hit me first. Garlic, herbs, and the rich, fruity scent of red wine. She'd cooked a proper dinner. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me without a sound. I was standing in our small entryway, my back against the door. The living room was ahead, lit only by the flickering light of a few candles on the coffee table and the dim glow from the kitchen. The music was clearer now. The playlist was on a mellow, romantic track. My eyes scanned the room. The couch cushions were dented as if two people had been sitting close together. And on the low coffee table the evidence was laid out like a crime scene. 2 dinner plates scraped mostly clean, 2 forks, 2 knives, and 2 wine glasses. One was empty. The other was still half full of dark red wine. My gaze drifted to the dining table, which we almost never used. It was clear except for a single vase with a wilting flower. They'd eaten on the couch, a cozy, intimate dinner. A fresh peal of laughter rang out, louder now that I was inside. It came from down the short hallway, from our bedroom, my bedroom. The sound was like a hook in my chest, pulling me forward. I left my duffel bag by the door. I took a step, then another, moving across the living room carpet. I passed the couch, my hand brushing against the soft fabric. I passed the coffee table, my eyes fixed on that half-full glass of wine. His glass. The hallway to the bedrooms was dark. A sliver of warm, golden light spilled out from our partially open bedroom door. It painted a bright stripe on the dark floor of the hall. I moved toward it, my body feeling detached, like I was watching myself from somewhere near the ceiling. I could see shadows moving inside the room, cast against the far wall by the lamplight. 2 shadows, close together. I reached the door. My heart wasn't hammering anymore. It felt like a stone, dead and heavy in my chest. The door was open just a crack, maybe 2 inches, enough to see a slice of the room. I leaned forward slowly. I put my eye to the gap. The first thing I saw was the end of our bed. Then the blue silk, the robe I'd bought her for her last birthday because she'd always wanted a fancy one. She was wearing it. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back mostly to me. Her hair was down, messy in a way that looked casual and deliberate at the same time. And right beside her, so close their legs were touching, was Mark. I recognized him instantly from his social media pictures. He was taller than I'd imagined. He had his arm draped around her shoulders, his fingers idly playing with the ends of her hair. They weren't kissing. They weren't in some dramatic, passionate embrace. It was worse. It was comfortable. It was familiar. It was the posture of 2 people completely at ease with each other's presence. They were both looking at his phone, which he held in his other hand. He said something, his voice too low for me to make out the words. Chloe's head tilted back and she laughed that same bright laugh, leaning her weight into his side. She playfully shoved his shoulder. "You're ridiculous," I heard her say, her voice warm and fond. "You love it," he replied, and I heard the smile in his voice. I watched frozen. This was a scene from a life that wasn't mine. This was a Tuesday night in an alternate universe where David didn't exist, or where David had already been erased. I don't know how long I stood there. A second, a minute. The song in the living room changed to another slow one. The shadows on the wall shifted as Mark put his phone down on the nightstand. His hand, the one that had been in her hair, came to rest on her back. And then I couldn't stand it anymore. The silent watching, the invisibility. I was a ghost in my own home and I was tired of it. I didn't plan to make a sound, but a breath I didn't know I was holding escaped my lips. It wasn't loud, just a sharp, pained exhale. Chloe's head turned. It was a slow, languid turn at first, and then her eyes found mine in the crack of the door. Everything stopped. Her smile died. The light in her eyes went out, replaced by a widening pool of pure, unadulterated shock. Her face, so relaxed and happy a moment before, went utterly pale. The blood drained from it so fast it was frightening. Her mouth fell open. "David," the word was a gasp, a disbelieving whisper that cut through the music. She sprang up from the bed as if the silk robe had caught fire, putting distance between herself and Mark. Mark jerked to his feet too, his expression cycling through confusion, surprise, and finally, a defensive kind of guilt. He looked from Chloe's horrified face to my unseen one behind the door. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the stupid, sentimental love song playing on a loop in my living room. I pushed the door. It swung open all the way, smooth and silent on its hinges. And there we were, the three of us standing in the ruins of my trust. I looked at Chloe, her hand clutched at her throat. I looked at Mark, who was now just a guy in an awkward situation, not a shadowy monster. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. I found my voice. It came out flat, empty, devoid of any emotion I could name. Surprise. That one word surprise seemed to hang in the air between us, brittle and sharp. For a long moment nobody moved. The music from the living room felt obscenely loud now, a soundtrack to a nightmare. Chloe was the first to break the paralysis. She took a half step forward, her hand dropping from her throat. "David," she said again, her voice stronger now but trembling at the edges. How are you here?" Her eyes darted to the small duffel bag I realized I was still clutching in my white-knuckled hand. "Your flight is tomorrow." I didn't look at her. My gaze was locked on Mark. He looked less guilty now and more inconvenienced, like I was a waiter who had spilled a drink on his jacket. He smoothed down his shirt, a simple, expensive-looking gray one I knew wasn't from my closet. "I think you should leave," I said to him. My voice was still that same quiet, dead tone. It didn't sound like my own. Mark glanced at Chloe, seeking guidance, permission maybe. She was staring at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "All right, man," Mark said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Just easy. It's not, we were just talking." He walked towards me, giving me a wide berth as he approached the bedroom door. The scent of his cologne, something woody and strong, hit me as he passed. It was the smell in my living room, over the garlic and wine. He'd been here for hours. I didn't turn to watch him go. I heard the shuffle of him collecting his shoes from by the front door, the soft thud of him putting them on, the metallic snick of the latch. Then the heavier final sound of the apartment door closing. The silence it left behind was a vacuum. It was worse than the music. Now it was just us, in our bedroom. The bed was rumpled where they had been sitting. The blue silk of her robe seemed to glow in the lamplight. I finally looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were wide, swimming with tears that hadn't fallen yet. Her expression was a frantic scramble of fear, shame, and a dawning defiance. "David," she began, her voice cracking, "please, let me explain." I walked past her, further into the room. My movements felt robotic. I went to the nightstand on my side of the bed. My nightstand. There, next to a book I'd been reading, was a wine glass. It had a faint lipstick mark on the rim, her shade. A red, full-bodied wine swirled at the bottom. Next to it was another glass, empty save for a dark residue. No lipstick. I picked up the empty glass. It was still warm from his hand. I held it up, looking at her through the smudged crystal. "Explain this," I said. "It's not what you think." The tears spilled over then, tracing shiny paths down her cheeks. She wiped at them angrily. "We were just having a drink. I was lonely, you were gone, and he's just a friend. He was just comforting me." The word comforting echoed in the quiet room. I looked from the glass in my hand to the bed, to her in the robe I'd paid for. "In our bedroom," I stated, my voice still horribly calm. "At 10 o'clock at night, after a candlelit dinner. Wearing the robe I gave you." I put the glass down with a precise click. "What kind of comfort was it, Chloe?" Her defiance surged. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to spy on me. You lied. You pretended to leave." She was pointing a finger at me now, her tears mixing with anger. "You set me up." "You're right," I said, and the admission seemed to startle her. "I lied. I set a trap, because I felt something was wrong. And I was right, wasn't I?" I gestured around the room. "This doesn't look like just friends. This looks like a date. This looks like the beginning of something you knew was wrong." "It was a mistake," she cried, the anger dissolving back into pleading. She wrapped her arms around herself. "It was one time. It didn't mean anything. I love you." Hearing her say she loved me, right here, right now, was the most painful thing yet. It was a lie layered on top of the betrayal, and it hollowed me out completely. "If you loved me," I said slowly, "you wouldn't be here with him. You wouldn't have let it get this far." I looked at her, seeing the woman I'd dreamed of a future with, and now only seeing a stranger. "You texted me miss you while you were cooking him dinner. Did you miss me, Chloe? Or were you just checking I was still safely out of town?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The fight seemed to drain from her all at once, leaving her looking small and broken. She sank down to sit on the edge of the bed, her face in her hands. Sobs shook her shoulders. I didn't go to her. The instinct to comfort her, to hold her, was a ghost of a habit, instantly smothered by the cold reality of the empty wine glass and his lingering cologne. I turned away from her crying. The emotion was finally breaking through my numbness, but it wasn't sadness. It was a clear, focused purpose. I was done. This chapter was over. I walked to our walk-in closet and flipped on the light. I saw my big suitcase, still packed for the real Chicago trip, standing in the corner where I'd left it. But I didn't need that one. I reached for a large hardshell suitcase on the top shelf, the one we used for long vacations. I hauled it down and laid it open on the closet floor. Then I began. I started with my side of the hanging rack. My suits, my dress shirts, my jackets. I took them off the hangers in bunches and laid them flat in the suitcase. I moved to the drawers. Socks, underwear, t-shirts, sweaters, I took them all. I wasn't sorting. I wasn't leaving anything behind. "What are you doing?" Chloe's voice was a raw whisper from the bedroom. She was standing in the closet doorway, watching me, her face blotchy and tear-stained. I didn't answer. I walked past her, back into the bedroom, and opened the top drawer of my dresser. My passport, my important documents folder, the small lockbox with my grandfather's watch. I took it all. "David, stop. Please stop." She was following me now, her bare feet padding on the floor. "We need to talk about this. We can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said, my voice finally showing a crack, a strain of fatigue. "You didn't break a vase, Chloe. You broke everything." I carried the armful of documents past her and placed them carefully in the suitcase. I went into the bathroom. My razor, my toothbrush, my cologne, the specific brand of hair product I used. I swept them all into a toiletry bag. I took the towel that was hanging on my rack, the dark blue one. I left the light gray one, hers, untouched. Each trip to the suitcase was a silent declaration. Each item packed was a piece of my life I was reclaiming from this space. Her pleas became a background noise, a soundtrack of grief for a relationship that had already ended the moment I saw Mark's arm around her. When the suitcase was full, bulging at the seams, I zipped it closed. The sound was final. I stood up and turned to face her. She was leaning against the doorframe, utterly defeated, her tears silent now. I looked past her, into our bedroom one last time. My eyes fell on the framed photo on her nightstand. It was us at Lake Tahoe, squinting in the sun, our faces tanned, our smiles huge and real. A memory from before the doubt, before Mark, before the secret flights and the half-full wine glasses. That version of us was gone. I walked to the front door, rolling the heavy suitcase behind me. It rumbled loudly on the hardwood. I picked up my duffel bag from where I dropped it. Then I set them both down. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keychain. It had my car key, a little gym fob, and the 2 silver keys to this apartment. I carefully worked the apartment keys off the ring. They felt light, insignificant. I placed them on the small, polished table by the door where we dropped our mail. They landed with a soft, metallic clink. "David," she whispered from the end of the hallway. She was just a silhouette in the dim light. "Please." I didn't have any more words. I had said my surprise. There was nothing else. I opened the apartment door. The hallway air felt cooler, less charged. I stepped out. I didn't look back. I pulled the suitcase over the threshold, then turned, grabbed the door handle and pulled it shut. The sound was precise. A solid, well-made door closing firmly in its frame. A soft, definitive thud of wood and metal meeting. It was the period at the end of the sentence, the end of the story. I stood there in the empty hallway, the suitcase at my feet. The music was gone. The laughter was gone. The lies were over. All that was left was a hollow silence and the long road ahead. The business trip was canceled. My real journey was just beginning, and I would be traveling alone.